we left off. Um, by the way, just so you're aware, I want to try to find out what Sinsamati is, which
What?
parent left off. Oh, echo. I could not find too much about it other than referencing back to Hegel.
What is this?
It's on the page. Uh, in chemistry, this Winter was calling it systemati, whatever, which apparently was a very brief example of trying to showing something that combine Hegel. I had to read somewhere else a little bit to understand what was going on, but it was a critique of the same thing of that analog procedure, where it's just sort of kind of creating the two things combine one, but they don't necessarily actually fully combine. So it's not really a real thing in the end.
Mm, yeah. Well, if you think about it, alchemy is also not a real thing, but we remember it because it's historically preceding chemistry. But this one might have been a dead end completely.
Yeah, because I it's seems I can't find much of any reference to it outside of people talking about Hegel. So it was a very quick dead end apparently. I think so much so that Winterl actually stopped using it in his third edition, according to Hegel. All
Yeah,
right.
that's interesting. The only thing that comes up is literally a Miller translation. Uh,
Yep.
um,
Phenomenology.
yeah. Well,
Yeah. So,
no, philosophy of nature.
oh, I had philosophy. I had phenomenology spirit pop up too pretty quickly.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah. So I'm saying this is apparently a critique. So
Yeah.
I I couldn't really get what he was trying to say at first, but all right. I guess I go here. First of all, we must set aside the formal process, which is a combination of merely different unopposed bodies. Such bodies do not require a third or middle term in which they could be virtually one on siege. The determinateness of their existence or relationship consists in their common nature or genus. Their combination or dissociation is immediate, and the properties of the bodies are preserved. Such combination of bodies chemically inactive toward each other are amalgams or other alloys of metals, mixtures of acids with each other, of alcohol, etc., with water and so forth. Okay, yeah, I guess that makes more sense because they're come together to form some sort of change in their combination, but it's not like a permanent change. It's a shape. They can separate again, and technically, even if it's a little impractical. Okay, that makes a lot more sense of what the critique is.
Sorry, I kept searching. It apps there's absolutely no reference.
Yeah, and so
So yeah.
Winterl had called this process Sinsamati. This name is not found elsewhere and has been accordingly been omitted from the third edition. So even the guy that invented the term realized it wasn't really a good description. So it's just sort of a kind of in-between state where things combine to create some sort of apparent change, like metals coming together to form something that has a lower melting point than them separates. But they're not necessarily a full chemical change. So the like in this sense, the metals are still the metals, just in a different amalgamation.
Yeah.
So it's an incomplete change of the shape of both of them. So there's like no actual interaction or anything. What we think as a chemical reaction doesn't happen here.
Yeah, and this cites alloys. Most alloys are not
Yeah.
chemical
And
compounds.
I'm just thinking here too, because he does talk later on about how a
So
strong acid.
combinations of bodies chemically inactive towards each other,
Mhm.
and those are synsomaties
Yeah, that was the initial concept, I guess, that got dropped because
because it doesn't exist in nature.
yeah, it's more of a.
It would be
Like you
like
said here,
magic.
amalgam is a better word, I guess.
It would be like magic almost. Like, yeah,
These consistent bodies are combinations formed directly without any intermediary, which would produce in itself undergo change. So it's like it was an actual thought it was an actual change, but it wasn't.
yeah.
They are still, in consequence, not strictly chemical processes.
That's
Fire
wild to
is
me. That's wild to me that not a single they, that's wild to me that there's not actually like historical material highlighting this older process process or lack of process outside of Hegel.
I'm sure it's some niche history science the
Book.
history of science we could find, yeah, but
Yeah,
we would think even the LLM would find it and it didn't.
you would probably have to dig pretty far into the print German archives to even find a reference like previous to Hegel.
He was a professor at Peace, and at the beginning of this 19th century, had an urge toward deeper insight into chemistry. He claimed to have discovered a particular substance, andronia, but his claim has not been substantiated.
Yeah,
That explains a lot. One of those academic that never really got outside of academia in its
yeah.
publishing. Okay. When various incomplete bodies are made to form a unity, what we ask, what is in them that has been changed? We must reply, that which makes them these particular bodies. Now, the first original determinant which renders them particular bodies is their specific gravity and extra cohesion. The combination of such bodies belonging to the same class is therefore no mere mixture, since their specific difference suffers modification in their combination. But since these determinants belong to the general particularity of bodies, lie beyond the sphere of real physical difference, the alteration is still not a characteristic chemical change, but the alteration of the substo inwardness of the body, which has not yet reached to external existence of specific difference as such. Alteration of the substantial inwardness of the body, so what defines it internally, which has not yet reached to external existence of specific difference as such. So it's just, yeah, it kind of doesn't change the external shape too much. Got it. We must therefore distinguish this particular mode of alteration from the chemical process, which, yeah, that makes more sense. For though it occurs in every chemical process, it must also have a special free existence of its own. The mixture is not external, but a genuine combination. Thus, water and alcohol mixed together completely permeate each other. True, the weight is the same as when they are separate, but the specific density differs from the quantitative unity of both, since they now occupy a smaller space. Yeah, just the way they kind of fit together does in fact make the combined volume shrink a bit. Similarly, golden it's I guess it makes sense because there's a shape of the molecules that do not change, even though their combination as a particular does in this merge process. Okay. Similarly, gold and silver melted together occupy a smaller space. This is why the goldsmith who was given gold and silver by Hiero to make a crown was suspected of fraudulently keeping part of it for himself. For Archimedes had calculated the weight of the whole mixture on the basis of the specific weight of two bodies. But Archimedes may well have done the goldsmith an injustice. Not only do specific gravity and cohesion alter, but color also. In brass, which is an alloy of copper and tin, the red color of copper turns yellow. With mercury, which readily amalgamates with gold and silver, but not with iron and cobalt, there is a specific region in which each metal saturates itself with the other. For example, if too little silver has been taken, the unsaturated portion of the mercury runs off. Or if there's too much silver, part of it does not enter into the change. Some combinations also have greater hardness and density than the metals taken singly. This is because the difference represents a higher being within self, whereas the undifferentiated body is lighter. Right, it's kind of an inner cohesion still. At the same time, amalgams are more fusible than the individual metals of which they compose would argue, since, on the contrary, a body immediately differentiated is more open to chemical change. and offers less resistance to it, just as the strongest natures are most obstinate in the face of violence, but freely and unreservedly yield themselves to those of kindred spirits. The Cartus alloy, a mixture of 8 parts bismuth, 5 parts lead, and 3 parts tin, melts at a temperature below that boiling point of water, will in fact melt in a warm hand. There are also earths not by themselves fusible, which become so in combination, a fact of some importance in metallurgy, which where it facilitates operations in foundries. Here we also must include the refining of metals, since this rests in diversity of melting point and combinations. Silver, for example, combined with copper is refined with the aid of lead. The heat which melts the lead carries the silver off with it, but the gold remains combined to copper in its presence. Aqua regia is a combination of hydrochloric and nitric acids. The separate acids do not dissolve gold, but only when thus combined. The synonymates, therefore, are alterations of the inner implicit difference. The chemical process proper, however, presupposes more determinate opposition. From this is still a greater activity and a more specific product are born. So I guess this makes some sense because this is even talked about a bit in chemistry when I was in even in college, just in the sense of chemistry. So yes, it is bet I guess even helped me kind of recognize that there is no actual reaction that occurs. And so it's just sort of the properties of the materials themselves that create this sort of change, like how salt, you add salt to water to melt it because it lowers the freezing point of water because of the way the salt it prevents the salt prevents the water from recombining into a crystal.
Hmm.
But it's not like a chemical reaction, I guess, although I just gotta think at the same time because the salt does decompose, just like adding water to an acid could help in some sense dissolve the acid maybe more, but then again, it's kind of already dissolved.
Yeah. It's it's hard to conceptualize
Yeah,
exactly what they mean as compared to how the process actually works. And I think that's what
right.
he's trying to differentiate. Like, here's this sort of schematic fantasy way for this to work, and here's how things actually work according to current science.
Yeah, I mean, some of it also is like metallurgy isn't necessarily a chemical reaction, but it is close. That's why it's talked about in chemistry, right? That's what I'm getting out of it. It's like a prelude to actual chemical reaction, because it is the dissolving of the bodies into a single one in a way that creates a different properties, but there's no actual interaction between the molecules of the material or even the atoms materials themselves.
Right.
And that's
It
the difference.
it it describes a state that is theorized but hasn't been demonstrated. Like
That too,
maybe
yeah.
like you just said, a pre uh like put the two
Prelude,
things
yeah.
to put the two things together, and how many like microseconds before they start reacting together, and what does that look like, and can you even call that a state when it's so vanishingly minuscule, you know what I mean?
Also, you talk about here two things combining. What's missing here? It's not a syllogism, is it?
Right, exactly. It's yeah.
Because he
um,
talks about that down here.
That's interesting because Fichte, I think, tries to do some of that with his stuff. It's either Fichte or someone else who, I think it is Fichte, who literally says it's thesis, antithesis, synthesis,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the synthesis is just it doesn't look anything like a dialectical unity preserving while reacting. It's just a sort of a static concept
Hmm.
that leads nowhere. And so maybe this is the chemical um analog to Fichte's ideal description the process, which, as
Hmm.
it turns out, doesn't actually work.
Remember, I was also talking about like even a force synthesis that itself is flat, like it comes back around to itself, but doesn't actually sublate. That's the same how that what that feels like here too. All right.
I'm here. Yeah,
Yeah.
my camera needs to reboot or something.
Always fun. At least yours didn't short out, hopefully, like mine did that one day. All right.
Well, alloys like steel is basically iron and carbon, and possibly other metals too, but mostly iron and carbon.
Yeah, it's like
It's
it's
not
just
a
like
it's not a chemical compound.
it's specifically more like it's just a crystal
Yeah.
at that point.
There we go. Sorry.
No
Nope.
worries.
Camera's fine. I just had to pull it out and plug it back in.
Yeah, I love that. Something crashed. All right. So 328. The real process is, however, of course, the real chemical process is
Hmm.
also connected with the chemical difference, the whole concrete totality of the body at the same time entering into it. Which realize we lock back to 200, which again was kind of in a sense, I guess, back when chemistry from the individual perspective, or we're looking at it now from a differential to the absolute. I'm trying to think about where we're at, or the absolute life. Yeah, we're just kind of come back around to it again. That's what I'm trying to point out. The body.
Are we about to go? Well, let me ask this real quick. Where we are in the book, are we about to go into the third part, the concept part of the book?
Well,
Because
that
it feels like we're starting to hint
I
toward
think
the actual
the
here.
life. We usually get to that. Organics, I think, is going to be the concept. So we are the
Yeah.
chemical process is the last of the essential.
Okay. All right. And we're not okay. Okay. Cool.
In life,
Because
no, life was even the chemical process in logic was under concept.
yeah.
So it is different here. Okay. That is interesting to think about though. Um, the bodies which enter into the real process are mediated in the third body distinct from them. The third is to the two extremes they're abstract, merely at first implicit unity which the process brings into existence. It accordingly comprises only elements, these being distinguished as the element of combination. Abstract neutrality as such, water, as the element of differentiation and association, air. As in nature, the different moments of the notion acquire separate existence. Oh, that's right. This so we're harkening back to the elements, but now we're seeing them more in the chemical, more realistic process because of course it's more concrete. Nature, different moments of the notion acquire separate existence. So here too, the dissociative and neutralizing sides of the process are each in themselves twofold. Each namely has a concrete and an abstract side. Disassociation is, on the other hand, a splitting up of neutral causality into material constituents, and on the other, a differentiation of the abstract physical elements into the four yet more abstract chemical moments of nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen, and carbon. Which, in reading this, I feel like we're talking about a more like primitive conception of these, which together constitute the total of the notion, determined in accordance with its moments. I gave you that because it's kind of how it goes into things that are only there in their concept, not necessarily the actual chem element. We have accordingly as the chemical elements the abstraction of indifference, nitrogen, the two elements of opposition, A, the element of substance differentiance, oxygen, the consuming element, which would be air, I believe, and B, the element of indifference, which belongs to their opposition, hydrogen, the combustible element, fire, and the abstraction of their individual element, carbon, which would be earth, to harken back to the original
Yeah.
elements. Combination, similarly, is on one hand a neutralizing of the concrete corporealities, on the other, a neutralizing of these abstract chemical elements. The concrete and abstract. Okay, yeah, they were kind of these abstract chemical elements at the time. The concrete and abstract sides of the process are, furthermore, as much unified as distinct. It is from the differences of the physical elements, which are the mean of the extremes of the process, that the indifferent concrete corporealities are activated, i.e., their chemical difference acquires an existence which presses on to neutralization and passes over into it.
Yes.
Okay, too bad yet. Ooh, okay. The general nature of the chemical process is, as a totality, the double activity of dissociation and the reduction of the separated parts of unity. And since the shaped bodies which take part in the process must come into contact with each other's totalities, so that their essential determinants is touch, which is not possible if they only attack each other by friction as mechanical different bodies do in the superficial electrical process. They must meet in what is indifferent, which, as their indifference, is an abstract physical element. Water is a principle of affirmation, and air is a principle of fire, of being for self, or of negation. The elements which form this middle term take part in the process and determine themselves to differences. Equally, they again fuse together into the physical elements. Here, therefore, the element is either the active principle in which individual bodies first display their activity toward each other, or else it is manifest as passive determination, as a transformation into abstract forms. The extremes are, however, combined to form the middle term, or if they are neutral bodies, example salts, they are decomposed into extremes. So, like acid and base come together to form something, and then salts dissolved in water dissolve. Okay. So, like sodium and chloride for table salt.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to.
Yeah.
The chemical process is therefore a syllogism, and not merely the beginning of the process, but its entire course is syllogistic. For the process requires three terms, namely two self-subsistence extremes and one middle term in which the determinants comes in contact and they are differentiated. It's kind of reminding of like the whole thing where you have catalysis, where it's like a third party that allows the chemical actions between two extremes to occur.
The catalyst.
Yeah,
And they teach you this in science. This is basic like first year first year what?
well, I'm trying to
Biology
think.
no, just chemistry. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'd say. It depends
Yeah,
on.
first year chemistry.
Yeah, from at college, yeah, chemistry.
Yeah.
I didn't
Sorry,
have
I mean
biology in
I
college.
I've watched too much Star Trek, and
That's
at this point in Star Trek, they're like, "Oh yeah, like there's no difference between physics and biology at the quantum level," which is true, but there aren't that
yeah.
many applications,
By the way,
until you get into Star Trek.
are you watching the new series at all?
I watched the first episode and I loved it, and
Yeah.
I know that it's people are contentious, but I'm
It
pretty sure the only people who are contentious about it are the fucking white supremacists
yeah,
running this
it's
country.
Star
So.
Trek always has been woke. I don't understand.
I know, like seriously. Okay, the only quibble I had about the first episode, all right, and here's my quibble, and you're gonna be like, you fucking nerd, but one of the aliens in the shot at the beginning, or so when you first go to the academy, one of the aliens is one of the people. It's like a woman who has half black, half white face, but in the plot, okay, the planet they killed each other, okay? There were none left except for those two guys, and they left them on the planet to like chase each other and kill each other.
Hmm.
The species was extinct, but for some reason, 900 years later, there's the woman with the half black, half white face. So I'm like, but they don't exist
The
anymore.
Q showed up and they exist again. I don't know.
It's got to, I don't know.
Anyways, it looked kind of cringy at first, but that was like the trailer. When you actually watch the show, it's typical Star Trek.
No, no, seriously. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
They did callbacks and the doctor from Voyager was there, but it wasn't like hitting you over the head with any of it. It was subtle, okay?
yeah, it
And
was. They overhyped the trailer, and
they overhyped the trailer, but when you actually watch the first episode, like I'm in love with the chemistry between Paul Giamatti and the new Captain chick. Like on screen, they're eye fucking each other the entire time, and it's like it shouldn't work, but it does. And I think it's because the two actors are having so much fun with it that it translates over. You know what I mean? Like they're supposed to
Mm.
be like mortal enemies, but they still treat each other like, they're gonna hop into bed in the next 5 minutes. It's I love it. Okay. I don't care what the critics say. Fuck the critics. Yeah, you know what I remember about TNG? The critics hated TNG when it first came out. And I'm like, that's par for the course. The original was canceled after 3 years. So this is, this is what we should expect. I'm okay with that. And I digress.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no worries.
I will talk about this for like
So
the next 3 hours if you let me.
the I was gonna find a way to butt in at some point, but we didn't have to. So
Yeah.
for a process requires three terms, only two self extremes, one middle term which determinants comes into contact and they are differentiated. Whereas in the merely formal chemical process preceding, only two terms were needed. Okay, so it was still technically, yeah, it is the formal chemical process, but it's not the real chemical process. Okay. Fully concentrated acid, which as such contains no water, when poured on metal, either fails to dissolve it or else has only weak action on it. Yeah, I guess yeah, like powdered acid or something, because isn't it become an acid because it's dissolved in water? Anyways,
Mm,
the other thing, if it's diluted with water, it attacks the metal vicariously simply because the process calls for three terms. Yeah, the water dissolves, separates it to where the hydrogen part of the acid is able to more come loose and attack the metal.
yeah.
Again, another thing where an intermediary is required. Yeah. Simply, it is the same with air. Tromstorff says, even in dry air, lead soon loses its luster, but it does so more quickly in moist air. Pure water does not act on lead if air cannot get to it. It therefore, a piece of freshly melted lead which is still very lustrous, is poured into a glass, which is full of water, distilled water, and then sealed. The lead remains quite unchanged. Lead, on the other hand, which lies underwater in vessels open to the air, soon loses all its luster. The same is true of iron, rust. Consequently,
Hmm.
it's formed only when air is moist. Air is
Yeah.
dry and warm. Yeah, because don't I think
It's an
what's
interesting
the
question because
yeah.
chemical processes over time are different. Rust is a chemical process that happens over a longer time than, say, putting together like an acid and a base that like immediately react. You know what I mean? And um,
There it is.
it's only what we see in the apparent world that we immediately characterize as a reaction, whereas slower moving reactions are harder to categorize and so forth without long running experiments. Okay, I'll shut up.
I was just taking a look to explain exactly how rust forms. It looks like it's a series of processes, so that's why it requires both.
Oh, I love this sentence. The four chemical elements,
Mhm.
earth, air, water, and fire, are the abstractions of the physical elements, whereas these latter are real in themselves. For some time, it was thought that all the bases were composed of such simple substances. See, with Hegel here, we're seeing the bridge over from the ideal elements to the actual physical elements, and that's why he holds the old ideal ones within his within his what do you call it, philosophical
System in metaphysics.
yes, system, because when you cross over to the actual chemical process, like the old abstractions, they're just like being and nothing, like they exist as abstractions, but they're not actually a thing in and of themselves. Earth, air, wind, and fire are not things in themselves. They're abstractions of real processes.
Where the four
Because
chemical elements are the abstractions of the physical elements, where the latter are
that
real in
is
themselves.
that is such a mind. God, that is such a mind fuck, actually.
Oh, because yeah, it's
Well, no, I
because
mean,
the
you
core
know, you
chemical.
go, yeah, like you go through the logic, okay, and you go through the section on being, and you try to imagine these things, being nothing, becoming, and all of this stuff, and trying to figure out their real world counterparts, and in the end, they're actually just ideal abstractions, separated from what they're connected to. They turn out to be nothing at all. And it's the same way here at this level. I'm starting to get it. It's not like I didn't know that before, but seeing it at this level where the four chemical elements and their reality is so thoroughly debunked by Hegel in favor of the physical elements is like, you know what I mean, guys? It's like, okay, yeah,
Well, it's a bridge between ancient science and modern science.
yeah. And
It's
Hegel
very,
finds a way to show how, yeah, and Hegel shows here how to logically connect them,
That's the
uh,
thing when you think
as
about it. Like,
as as levels of abstraction, which
I
is what
mean,
they are.
I'm just trying to think though, if it's just a kind of if it's because of the chemicals they were testing and stuff at the time, but if you think about it, the four elements he does talk about, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, are all part of the organic chemistry, like the main chemicals.
yeah.
Yeah,
So I always thought the bases were composed of such simple substances, just as they are now supposed to be composed of metallic substances. Glution supposed lime to be composed of nitrogen, carbon, and hydrogen, talc of lime and nitrogen, potassium and of lime and hydrogen, and sodium of talc and hydrogen. In vegetable and animal organisms, Stephens again tried to find the opposition of carbon and nitrogen and so on. Subtractions, however, appear on their own as chemical differences in individual bodies only because process gives the universal physical elements as a middle term the character of existing differences. Okay, that helps because it's kind of the in between that allows them to, yeah, and thereby separates them into these abstractions. Water is thus differentiated into oxygen and hydrogen, just as it's not permissible to represent water as consisting of oxygen and hydrogen, as physicists do, a point to which we do particular attention in connection with meteorology. So air too must not be thought of consisting of oxygen and nitrogen, where these are two are only the forms under which air is posited. These abstractions then are not integrated through, yeah, because it's reductionist. These abstractions then are not integrated through one another, but in a third term in the extremes, which have gotten rid of their abstraction, have completed themselves into the totality of the notion. There it is already. As regards to the chemical elements, they are called
yeah,
substances after the bases, regardless of their form. But with the exception of carbon, none of them can be kept on its own as a substance, but only exhibited only in the form of a gas.
yeah.
Yeah, in their pure elements, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen are pure gas, and then carbon is the only thing that's pure solid. Yet they are, as such, material ponderable existences, since, example, metal, when oxidized by the addition of oxygen, also gains in weight, and white lead, for instance, example, lead in combination with the abstract chemical element of oxygen, weighs more than lead in its pure state. Lavoisier theory is based upon this. The specific gravity of the metal is, however, reduced. It loses its indifferently solid character. The four elements constitute a totality in the following manner. Alpha, nitrogen, is a dead residue corresponding to metallurgy. It cannot be inhaled, nor does it burn, nor can it be differentiated oxidized. The air of the atmosphere is an oxide of nitrogen.
Hmm.
Trying to think, it can't be inhaled. I mean, literally no, but in the sense of like it, we breathe in all the time without reaction for the most part. Like nitrogen 3, our bodies completely don't process. Uh, Beta, hydrogen is a positive side of determinateness in the opposition. The differentiated nitrogen gas, it is incapable of supporting animal life, and animals are soon suffocated in it. Phosphorus does not catch fire in it, and it extinguishes a light or any burning substance plunged into it, because that's oxygen required.
Hmm.
But it is self-combustible and can be made to burn as soon as the air or the atmosphere or oxygen gas has access to it. Right. The other side of the term is the negative. The activating principle is oxygen. It processes a characteristic smell and taste and activates the former two elements. Yes, definitely is. The fourth element of totality is the defunct individuality, carbon, ordinary coal, the chemical terrestrial element, and in its transfigured form is a diamond, which is held to be pure carbon and is, as rigid terrestrial shape, crystalline. Whereas carbon alone can exist independently, the other elements achieve separate existence only by force and so only exist momentarily. Just trying to think of the form he's talking about here, separate from what's in my head for chemistry. So it is chemical determinations that make up the forms out of which solid substances are in general integrated. Only nitrogen remains outside the process, generally, but hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon are differing moments which are beaten into physically individual bodies, whereas these lose their one-sidedness. The process is abstractly the identity of judgments and the unification of the terms distinguished by the judgments. And in its course, the process is the totality turning into itself. But its finitude consists in this. And I think something that actually kind of got me here is that the moments of the process also possess bodily independence, so that totality contains a presupposition of immediate corporities, which, however, are equally only the products of the process. Because of this immediacy, the bodies appear to exist outside the process, and the process to come to them. For the same reason, too, the moments in the course of the process fall apart into immediate and distinct processes. The course of the process as a real totality becomes a circle of particular processes, each of which presupposes the other, but is itself initiated from without and becomes extinct in its particular product, without from its own resources continuing itself and passing imminently into the process which forms the next moment of totality. In one of these processes, the body appears as a condition, in another as a product. Its specific chemical nature is determined by the particular process in which it occupies one or the other position. Only on the basis of these positions in the particular process can a classification of bodies be founded. Two sides of this process are, one, the passage from the indifferent body through its activation to neutrality, and two, from this combination back to dissociation into in different bodies.
This passage reminds me of sections of uh, Marx's Capital, where he talks about where he talks about the product of labor being the the uh, being the outcome of a process
Yep.
um, of manufacture, and how that process of manufacture, I think, is the presupp presupposition. Like Marx talks about the product of a process, and uh hang on, sorry.
All right.
Okay, he says each of which presupposes the other, but is itself initiated from without and becomes extinct in its particular product. So, so the in its particular product, capital, and its production process, the products that go into its making go, become extinct. And I don't know. He talks about. Okay, let me read this again. For the same reason, too, the moments in the course of the process fall apart into immediate and distinct processes. The course of the process as a real totality becomes a circle of particular processes, each of which presuppose the other, but is itself initiated from without and becomes extinct in its particular product, without from its own resources, continuing itself, passing imminently to the process which form the next moment of the totality. There's so much about this. There's so much about this sentence that reminds me of Marx describing the labor process in making a product with raw materials, so on and so forth. The coat is made through weaving. So yeah, you guys know what I mean?
Yeah. Also, I was thinking in comparison to thinking ahead, the way you talked about this being finite, things kind of come into the process and become neutralized or come out of the process is in difference to life, like in the like homeostasis, where it's a series of physical and chemical reactions that are using to maintain a single state that continues and to sustain itself.
Yeah.
That's why I think he talks about it like implies like it kind of ends. It kind of comes to the chemical and then disappears. There's nothing else that seems to kind of push it forward because he's kind of already showing it how it's silent compared to in the future life, which is a process that drives itself. And we can say that because we already had the concept of life from logic. So that's also the thing I was thinking about in here.
Hmm.
Oh, and you might talk
God.
about more here too. Go ahead.
No, I'm just realizing that the more I get into this, the more I understand earlier stuff I've read, and it makes me realize I have to go back and read that stuff in light of this because, like,
Yeah.
it's God, it's so infuriating. Like, I'm gonna have to read this until I literally die just to understand it. And just on a historical note, like it makes me realize how inaccessible all of this was, even when Hegel tried to make it accessible. Like one of the only people who understood what Hegel was doing with the phenomenology, for example, was his friend Goethe. Goethe read the phenomenology and he said, "Yep, I see what you're doing." And Hegel later said that Goethe was one of the only people who read it and was like, "Yep, I see what you did there." And everybody else, it's a long line of people just going like, I don't know what the fuck he's doing. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
All
Yeah.
right. The chemical process is still finite in comparison with the organic process. Yep, there it is, literally.
Yeah.
Alpha,
Exactly
since,
as you said. Yeah.
yeah, I didn't get this far yet. So my turn to get to kind of think ahead. Alpha, since you need the diremption and the diremption itself, which are absolutely inseparable in this vital
No
process,
process.
yeah, for in this, the unity perpetually converts itself into object, and what is a separate off of from itself perpetually converts into its own self. This infinite activity still falls apart into two sides in the chemical process. The differentiated sides can be brought together again is for them an external indifferent affair. With this diremption, one process was finished and a new one can now begin. Beta, the finitude of the chemical process consists further in the fact that although each one-sided chemical process is again also the totality, so it is so only in a formal way. Combustion, for example, i.e., the positing of a difference, oxidation finishes as diremption. But with such a one-sided process, there's also produced a neutrality, water, uh, two is generated. And conversely, in the process which culminates in the neutral body, there's also differentiation, but only in an abstract manner. Gases, namely, are developed. Gamma. The shapes then which appear in the process are in the first instance stable. The process consists in depositing of such distinct formations into a unity or enforcing them out of their indifferent existence into difference,
Mm,
without the body being able to preserve itself. The implicit unity of the distinct sides is, it is true, the absolute condition, but since they still appear as distinct bodies, they are only in principle or notionally one, and their unity has not yet come into existence. Acid and caustic potash are in principle identical. The acid is in itself alkali, and that is why it thirsts for the alkali, as caustic potash thirsts for acid. It is an acid because it's defined by the alkaline, by the
yeah.
base. That's what I'm thinking too. Each has the urge to integrate itself. In this example, each is in itself neutral, but it does not yet exist as neutral. Kind of a teleology here. The finitude of the chemical process here, therefore, is that the two sides of the notion and existence do not correspond to each other, whereas in the living creature, the identity of the differences also exists. Wait, that's gamma and then delta. Okay. True, in the chemical process, the differences sublate their one-sidedness, but this sublation is only relative, elapsed into another one-sidedness. The metals become oxide, the substance changes to acid, neutral products, which again are always one-sided. Epsilon, it follows from this too that the totality of the process breaks up into distinct processes. The process whose product is one-sided, is itself incomplete, is not the total process. I think I'm starting to feel like the finite
Yeah.
goes beyond to the infinite, which itself is found to be another finite, which itself goes beyond to another infinite, which falls to a finite kind of thing here. So it's the beginning of an infinity.
Yeah.
Well, it's a process. Well, process is itself. Uh, each step is itself finite in a full, infinite process, right?
Yeah.
Therefore, the process is not again itself. The process is finished when one determinant has been posited in the other. Therefore, this process is not itself the genuine totality, but only one moment of the whole total process. In itself, each process is the totality of the process. But this totality breaks up into distinct processes and products. The idea of the chemical process in its entirety is thus a series, okay, yeah, here we go again, of broken processes which represent the various stages and transitional points of that series. Was I wrong when I called that gamma? Because that looks like, oh, that's zeta. Okay.
That's zeta.
Another feature of the finitude of the chemical process is that it is to these same stages of this process that the particular individual corporeal form belong. In other words, particular corporeal individualities are determined according to the stage of the process to which they belong. The superficiality of the electrical process still has a very slight connection with the individuality of the body, and the small determination which caused the body to become charged with positive electricity. It is in the chemical process this connection first becomes important. In the various chemical processes, there's a host of sides and substances which can be distinguished. Before one can grasp this complex, one must distinguish in each process which substances are active and which are not, and the two must not be set on the same level but must be kept well apart. The nature of a body depends on its position in relative to the various processes in which it plays the part of generator, determinant, or product. True, it is also capable of entering into still other processes, but it is not the determining factor in them. Thus, in the galvanic process, pure metal is the determining factor. It does indeed also pass over into the process of fire as alkali and acid, but these do not give its place in the total process. Sulfur also has a relationship to acid in its effective as so related, but is in relationship to fire that is its determining factor. This gives it a place, its place. In empirical chemistry, however, bodies are described by their reactions to all chemical substances. If a new metal is discovered, its reactions to the whole range of chemical substances are gone through. Yeah, this is pre-elemental table. We've kind of learned the electrical uh, reaction. Yeah. At glance at textbooks of chemistry to ascertain how the various bodies are classified shows the main distinction to be between so-called simple bodies and those which are combinations of such bodies. Lumped together under the former heading, one finds nitrogen, hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, phosphorus, sulfur, gold, silver, and the rest of the metals. But one sees at first glance that these things are quite heterogeneous. Compounds are also certainly products of the process, but the so-called simple bodies also result from the more abstract processes. Finally, for chemists, it is the dead product resulting from this or that process that is the main thing described. But in truth, the main thing is the process and the sequence of stages of the processes. Its course is the determining factor, and the determinateness of the individual bodies have significance solely in its distinct stages. This, however, is a finite formal process in which each body, through its particularity, exhibits a modified course of the total process, which is the subject matter of chemistry, which presupposes a body's determinants as given. Here, on the contrary, we must consider the process in its totality, how it distinguishes the classes of bodies. and characterizes them as stages of its core, stages which become fixed. This process.
The totality is a
Yeah.
chain of particular processes. They are a circle whose periphery is
Yeah.
itself a chain of processes. The totality of the chemical process is thus a system of particular modes of the process. One in the formal process of here's that word
Sensibility.
again. God damn it. The sensimities with which we have already dealt. The difference is not yet a real one. In the actual process, the crucial point is the mode in which the activity exists. And it goes into that. And
Oh, we are actually at the end of our reading, anyways.
yeah.
If you
Yeah.
want to finish that
So
right quick.
yes, yeah. So he maps it out.
Yeah.
Uh yeah. Yeah, just leave it with
Plus,
me
we
and I'll
have the
put it on the
metals
charger,
here
okay?
whose difference
Bring it here and I'll
in
put it on the
galvanism,
charger later.
it exists as a
Ooh,
diversity of indifferent bodies. Here, too, the
no,
difference is not
it
yet
works.
present
Can you bring it to me?
in as a reality, but the mere diversity is posited by the
No.
activity of the
Bring
processes.
the thing
Real
to me and I'll
difference.
charge it. Sorry.
That's all right. Thus, we have metals here whose differences are in contact, and because this association, they are active, i.e., are really different, we have process there. B, in the process of fire, the activity is independent existence apart from the body, where fire is thus imminently negative, destructive being for self, the restless, really different element whose outcome is the positing of difference. This is a fun way to kind of talk. I can see kind of the abstract concept of plasma right there, because it is kind of not, it is there, but it's not. It's like a ghost. The process is in the first instance elemental and abstract. Its outcome, which is the first give fire first a bodily existence, it is transitioned to the caustic alkalis to active acids. C, the third stage now is the process of these active substances, whereas the first was the positioning of the oxide, the second was positioning of the acid. Differentiating activity now exists in bodily form, the product of the reduction to neutrality, the production of salts. The finally return to the neutral substance to its beginnings, to acid, to oxide, to radical. The process starts with a different body, then comes to positing the differentiated bodies, then their opposition, and lastly the neutral body as product. But since the neutral body is itself one-sided, it is in turn reduced to an indifferent one. The different body is a presupposition of the chemical process, and thus presupposition is the product of the process. In empirical treatment, the forms of substances are the main thing, but the starting point must be particular forms of process. These must be distinguished. It is only in this way that the empirically endless variety of substances can be grouped into a rational system, and that one can avoid that abstract universality which chaotically lumps everything together. So
Bless you. Yeah.
we got the amalgamation. Let me get fire, acid and alkaline, and then like water
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
salts.
that final section
Yeah,
I
and
think I
then
think really says a
backwards.
lot. Yeah. In empirical treatment, the forms of the substances are the main thing, but the starting point must be the particular forms of process, and these must be distinguished. The differences within the unity must be identified before you can actually call it a full unity. Many times people declare a unity, I think, without identifying the differences properly. And that's where you get into science christening uh ideal the ideal as real in certain cases. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like you know, what's that word again? Since Cincinnati's are processes that we thought were going on when really it's just an ideal it's a hypothesis of a real thing that turns out to have been just a guess, right? Of how something
Yeah.
works.
Well, sometimes that's how you start, and then you find it's whether it's real.
Hmm. Yeah, and notice how this is all the way at the beginning. It's at the level of it's at the level of being without a conceptual counterpart at all. You know what I mean? Like he tried to start by declaring this a concept when in fact it was one of those categories that sort of disappears in the becoming. What is I'm getting that wrong, but you know what I mean.
Mhm.
The Yeah, it's a positing of a process. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to say that right. Sorry. Okay, 244.
We finally caught up to our planned reading.
I know.
One,
Isn't that great?
yeah.
244 to
Ooh,
let's see if there's a
I'd say galvanism as its own thing. It's
yeah.
just galvanism, 'cause that's quite a bit.
Yeah, 244 to 256. Because
And
then
then
it's the process of fire at
everything
330.
else after, yeah, that, okay. I can see what we're going to choose next for readings.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
How
like we're splitting
far?
this in half.
Oh, okay.
So there's 256 and 256 to 272, and then we're to organics.
Look at that. Uh, and you get in here and like you start to be able to read this because of what we read before. So he says the real totality of body is the infinite process in which individuality determines itself to particularity or finitude, and equally negates this and returns into itself, reestablishing itself at the end of the process as its beginning, is thus an elevation into the first ideality of nature, but an ideality which is fulfilled and as self-regulated negative unity has essentially developed the nature of self and become subjective. This accomplished, the idea has entered into existence at first as immediate existence, life. And I actually understood exactly what that means given what has come before. Yeah, he's yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't have been able to read that sentence without the first two parts of the book. That's
Right.
freaking cool.
Although apparently synsomates is a from the Greek that talks about putting bodies together.
Yeah, I yes. Yeah.
Okay, so it makes sense because it is literally what you're doing.
Well, if you listen to how it's like sounded out, it
Mhm.
almost sounds like synthetic.
Synsoma, yeah.
Yeah, synthetic. I could be wrong about that, but yeah. Well, synthetic is like something put together, not of nature. Like Data was not of nature. He was put together by Sung in the Star Trek narrative, right? He's an
Oh,
artificial being. Yeah. So so
okay.
so what would we call AI today? Senso
Like
um
knowledge or something.
yeah, or like
Synthetic
yeah,
knowledge.
and it's funny because that's what it ends up being, is that like they try to pass off an incomplete. We used to call it natural. We back when I took my library degree, they were trying to figure out in computer programming how to approach the idea of, I mean, AI.
Talking about like a natural language interface.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Like we were talking about going from like what were those things like word clouds to having an interface that could crunch not numbers but words into something. And there's a gulf between trying to do that and like real real AI and I th- they either must be full of shit or must know something we don't about AI. Like I don't know how AI works, okay?
I
Uh
mean, I
or
kind of
or
gist of it, although maybe not. It's the the next word in your text when you do text, I recommend the next likely word.
yeah.
That's AI to a larger extent.
Yeah, it's
It's just been
it
trained on a lot more
it's
stuff.
it's it's an it's a heuristic. It's trained to be it's something that's trained to anticipate the next thing. But
Right. It's
um
surprising, makes it surprisingly way better than anything before, but it's still not perfect. Next word might be completely off base.
okay, I'm having a I sorry, reading Hegel today has given me a total brain dump. Um is AI what AI is what everyone's um crapping their pants about right now,
Yeah.
aren't they? Is that what
It's
we're calling it, or is there another word?
Well, it depends what you're talking about. Because
Well,
from the
well,
degree of AI, it's a lot of people
well,
when they think AI
Jim,
like in the movies, they're thinking
well,
AGI or artificial general intelligence, which doesn't exist right now.
so so here's the thing. So Chat GPT, what's that called?
A
Is that
large language model.
Yeah,
right?
that's a
Right, but what?
specific form of it. Yeah, it's like the buzzword is AI. Yes.
Okay, so the buzzword that they're using is a why are they going all the way to AI with the buzzword when all it really is
Well,
like a trained
it's
algorithm with complex heuristics?
Well, there's two parts of it. If you think about it, I think there's more Hegelian sense of like the degrees as it gets more and more toward AI. It's closer to that direction, so it's fair to throw the umbrella term on it. But it's not AI as an artificial general intelligence or AGI, which is the end goal for AI.
Mm.
So it's partial buzzword, partial that kind of closer to true AI. I mean, you can buy a freaking like rice cooker that says it uses AI and it's just like literally doesn't because it's like it once because once the rice cooker starts gets rid of the water, it starts getting too hot and it just pops because of the thermistor in it. That's what they're called. That's what the buzzword for AI feels like sometimes.
Yeah.
It's something nothing to do with AI.
I just wonder. I it when you think about it, the distance between like sentient a like actual sci-fi sentient AI and what we have right now in ChatGPT is like so it, it's such a gulf, and it's also even to do what current AI actually does, it's so expensive that to and this is where I enter like speculative sci-fi. Like in order to jump the gulf to like Skynet when it's already so expensive to do just what we're doing all the way back here is like you'd have to set up the biggest solar power generator you've ever seen in space and
Or
like
nuclear.
y- y- and and they're already trying to do that. Like
I know
there are things in the works. Uh
XAI is definitely
yeah,
looking for
that
nuclear power.
they're trying to recertify nuclear plants all across the U.S. to
Yeah.
try to harness them to AI. Of course, it's going to turn this entire country into 3 Mile fucking island.
Well,
So
if it's
you watch,
not managed well, which considering the speed of XAI,
Kyle.
would not be
What about
surprised.
the last 5 years? Screams managed well in the United States,
I had to
especially
try.
in your state. Jesus
I
Christ.
No, I had to put that point out there because there are a few places that might be fine, and there are other places that are like, this is hurting business flow due to all these regulations.
Well, sure, but when it comes to nuclear,
Yeah,
like the places that aren't managed well will negate the ones that are managed well because nuclear fallout is a thing. Even when it's low grade, that stuff still evacuates into the air and can contaminate like how many miles radius around it? Like, yeah,
this kind of thing that's kind of like I don't know. We'll have to see to what degree that is
yeah.
because they do have a thing where they use like nuclear like material balls instead of like rods that are easier to shut down.
Mm. Well, maybe
Yeah, it depends what they do.
let's hope so because
Let's just
if
not make sure they don't go like this is too slow and too and then not not fast enough go faster and then they just start tripping over themselves and then
yeah,
take too many shortcuts.
well, I'll be crossing my fingers, I guess.
Well,
All right,
same.
comrades, I gotta let you go, but y'all have a good night. Again, we're doing galvanization, and then the last part is what was the last part called? It was called
Everything else, but it's like I forget. It goes to dissociation and then oh
yeah.
yeah,
So, oh
the
wow,
first
okay.
process is galvanization, and then we think we have
The
like
process of fire, and
yeah
then
combustion to
and then
neutralization,
neutralization water
the process of
process.
totality, and then
Yeah,
dissociation, which is the reverse. And then the
yeah,
final couple paragraphs that go to organics that step
yeah.
up to organic.
Yep. All right. Take it easy, comrades.
There we go.